Thank you, everyone, for joining us today to 50 Leaders Over 50. My name is Marcella Giancarelli, and this very much to the point of what Joan had pointed out earlier, we are about what life will be like in the second half of your life. Ideas, ways of connecting, ways of enriching and self-fulfillment. For many, many years, all of us have been career directed, child directed, family directed, and all of that is amazing. And it's a wonderful part of our lives. But when's it okay to say, okay, fine, I need to break the fear to step into maybe selfish isn't a bad word when it's about fulfillment and maybe some gifts that you can share with others. So that's how this all came about. It was during the pandemic. And we're just launching this. This is our third meeting. And we have an amazing keynote speaker. But what I'm going to do now is I am going to pass the baton to Helen Lawler, who's going to give us a snapshot version of what more that we are about. And Helen.
Thanks, Marcella. Welcome, everybody. So 50 Leaders Over 50 was created to empower professionals to share life's inspirational perspectives that can only be earned through experience. We encourage people over 50 to contribute their leadership, integrity, and allyship in collaboration with others to enrich all of our lives. No matter what success you've had so far, we recognize there's much more to achieve. So it's our goal to create a platform for empowering, inspiring people over 50 to maintain vibrancy, continue professional and personal growth, and make a greater impact on others in New Jersey and beyond.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Helen. And we also have an advisory board, which consists of Andrew Fraser, who is part of us too. Well, actually, he's part of our original founding members with Helen and myself. And then we have our advisory board, which is Barry Cohen, who's not on with us as of yet, as well as Gene. Gene did introduce himself. So Gene Sauer, and he's amazing too as well. So we are looking forward to additional programming going forward. So I'm going to put us on speaker view and introduce, and it should be speaker view is now Helen and not Tim. And, I do not know how that happened. So let's see. How do we do that? Can someone walk me through that? I do apologize for that because I don't know what I did different. I didn't do anything different. Tim, can you speak? And maybe it'll go to you as speaker view. Yep, there you are. You're on. You're the speaker. That's why it was on Helen, because she was the last speaker. Right. Tim Marshall is the Breaking Fear expert. He had spoken for us at Lakeland Bank, and I will tell you, it was a showstopper, totally amazing. His book on breaking fear, he's the author of over 7 books during the pandemic, and is an expert in his field, not only just through motivation, but also through the fact of all his knowledge. And he's coming to us from Florida right now. So I'm going to introduce Tim Marshall, the powerhouse, about breaking fear and how to launch and love the second half of your life. Tim, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. And the first thing I'll say is I'm actually 35. I'm not 50. I'm not over 50. No, but the thing that really got me involved with Marcella in reference to this topic is, yes, when I hit 50 and beyond, I hit the wall going about 220 miles an hour. And, if I take it back to when I really took on fear, it was as a child, right? We all come from something that's either going to make us or break us. And growing up, we all go through different situations, and I was shuffled around, and, one of those things where I just couldn't get it. I didn't do well in school. I basically dropped out of school. My parents used to go to work, and I had a little park bench across the street, and I would hide under a tree, and I'd wait for them to pull out of the driveway at the age of 12. And that was the first time I ever skipped school. And that one day turned into 2 days, and that 2 days turned into a couple of weeks, and a couple of weeks turned into a couple of months that turned into years. And somehow, in some way I got away with it without them knowing until they found out that I was truly kicked out of school. And at that time, as a teenager, it was very difficult because I really did think I was the dumbest guy on the planet. I thought I was basically scum. For whatever reason, I just didn't have any confidence. I had all kinds of self-defeating thoughts. I worked, I delivered papers, and I dug ditches, and I bust tables, and I waited tables, but I just couldn't get the academics. I couldn't get the process of how kids were groomed and how they were, going through school, and I couldn't do it. I literally just gave up. And it wasn't until I was 20 years old that I accidentally found a tape in my parents' garage called The Strangest Secret by Earl Nightingale. And it said, "You become what you think about." And then I listened to it again and again and again and again. And then I realized, you know what? I didn't really become what I thought about. I just didn't do what I should have done. And that was the first time, for whatever reason, fear came into my mind. I realized, you know what? I have a major fear of failure. I have fear of judgment, comparison, all these different fears that created so much immobility and self-doubt. And for whatever reason, as my dad said, I just got up one day and I never looked back. And I got my GED, which is the equivalent of, a high school diploma. And I had to make up 7 to 8 years of middle school and high school. Plus I wanted to get a college degree, which is another 4. So that's 11 years. And even when I applied, which I didn't get any university, I had to go through the community college. And when I took the entrance exam, it showed that I had a 6th or 7th grade education. And I had to make up all these classes just to even get a college credit. So I'll never forget when the counselor asked me, she's like, "Tim, you're so far behind. Are you sure you want to do this?" And I thought to myself, not really. I don't want to do this, but I have to do it. And it was at that very moment in time where I faced down my fears. And I took 11 years and I turned them into 4.5 years. I went from beginning math to tutoring in quantitative methods. And I literally had a goldfish in my bedroom. I had books everywhere, highlighters. I literally cut off my whole personal life. And all I was focused in on was getting my degree. And summer classes I took, sometimes 6, the most classes you can take. So I actually found myself the last semester before graduation so incredibly stressed out that my heart went off when I was in one of my industrial marketing classes, to the point that I thought I was going to die. I went out to the parking lot. I was dizzy and I couldn't see, and I called an ambulance, and I'm like, "I'm dying." And they're like, "You're not dying." I'm like, "I am dying." And all of a sudden I got stuck with these panic attacks. And then, through the panic attacks, it made me creep back into that self-doubt and that fear again. Now all of a sudden I have a fear of dying. And meanwhile, I have to finish my last semester. So somehow, some way, I managed to finish it. But before I did, I'll never forget when I did a presentation in my industrial marketing class. My teacher came up to me afterwards. He said, "Tim, let me give you some advice." He goes, "Whatever you do, don't go into outside sales or marketing because you look like you're going to die." And meanwhile, I was having these panic attacks and I felt like I was. So my point was, I started thinking, I'm like, you know what? I'm letting this fear cripple me again. And then I was like, you know what? If my heart goes off or whatever it is, and I have all these panic attacks, I don't care anymore. Bring it on. Bring it on. It doesn't matter to me. And then they went away. So that was another component of breaking fear. And then through all this time, I started to take notes. And then I did the opposite of what my teacher said, and I went into outside sales. And then I took on the beast of fear of rejection, which, based on the fact, when you're growing up and you don't have a lot of confidence, rejection is probably the hardest thing you're going to deal with, especially with confidence issues. That's where people suffer the most, starting a company, sales, whatever it is. We're all in some type of sales. So what I did was I took fear of rejection on to the point that the average person might make 20 calls a day or 40 calls. I would make 250 calls. I wanted to be rejected. I wanted to overcome being rejected. And through that process, I learned how to build relationships with strangers. And I was hired by this tech company, and it was selling copiers, which later on I found out was one of the hardest fields you could ever be in. So within 6 months, I get back in the day, they had these fax machines, and the administrator came up to me after I was working at this company, and she goes, "Tim, this is for you." And I looked at it, and it said, I won the 6-month contest because it was a junior rep contest around the country. Not only that, but I broke the company record. And that turned into an accelerated process of wanting to be the very best in the world at what I wanted to do in order to teach other people so they didn't have to go through the same pain and all the different things that I went through personally and professionally. So then I started teaching people on how to sell and how to lead your life. And then I took more notes. And then as I went out to these customers, because I was going out to every diversified company you could think of, because technology, every company needs technology. So I was exposed to some of the smallest, medium, biggest companies in the world. And then I became the #1 account manager for Toshiba for 10 straight years in the country. But it was all based on the fact of overcoming the fear of rejection, building relationships with strangers, knowing my brand, knowing my story, keeping it simple, leveraging those contacts in a way where they trusted me enough that they would actually give me other accounts to go into. So I literally crushed the sales model. And then came to the point where it was like, okay, well, I've done this. Now what's next? And when I graduated college, I took a minor in entrepreneurship. So it kind of went through my mind, okay, well, I've done this, I've done that. And you know what? I have not started a business yet. And for whatever reason, it just kept reoccurring in my mind. And then in 2007, I started to do all my due diligence and started to study on how to start a company, build a company, scale a company. But meanwhile, before that, I spent years practicing, teaching managers and salespeople on how to build up their customer base. And I started to understand the formulas of entrepreneurship. And I started to understand more about the mathematics of a business model. So I made a decision to start a company in January 2008, which, lo and behold, I had no idea the market was going to crash. Now what? I got 3 small kids. I made a decision in my mind that I'm going to do it. And I brought it up to other people, and they said, "You are absolutely nuts. Don't do it now." So I'm like, well, that's fear, right? I'm taking something and I'm putting myself in the worst situation and the least amount of probability to succeed, potentially. So I did it. But here's what the factors and where people get maybe some misconceptions about starting a company. You don't have to have a lot of money to start a company. Yes, I made money in sales and I did well and all these, different things, company trips, and yes, it's wonderful. But how do you start a company without borrowing a single penny, without using your own money, and build it just like that? That was my next breaking fear part. So when the market crashed in January 2008, what I did do prior to that is I built relationships to the point that before I opened up my company, I already had sales. I had agreements signed. I didn't have the inventory, but I had the relationships, I had the evidence, and I had the trust, so that when the doors opened, I was already profitable. And I was profitable for 5 straight years. I made Inc. magazine's list as far as one of the fastest growing companies 4 years in a row. And then I sold it in less than 5 years. And it wasn't so much about just building something and selling the company. It was also understanding the formulas of what it takes and understanding that anyone can do it. You know, I hear different people all the time say different things. Well, somebody might not have that same capacity to do it, or somebody can't do this, or they can. Everyone can do anything. I mean, I can tell you this from somebody that really struggled with even English, grammar, mathematics. I used to use my calculator, and then I threw away my calculator. I started to do mathematics in my head. I started to press myself to the point that I wanted to push every single thing to the point that whatever I thought I couldn't do, I'd be able to do it, but more importantly, teach it to somebody else. So when I sold the company, I stayed on for a couple more years, which they signed me up for 3 years. And it wasn't so much that I just stayed on just to learn more, but I stayed on to make sure that I took care of my employees that were very loyal to me. I didn't want anybody to get fired, let go, whatever it is. It was really, really important to me. Even though it was part of my fear model, I wanted to have the integrity and, you know, give the people that were, you know, trusting me, give them the ability to either, number one, be better people, business people, entrepreneurs. So I stayed on for 3 years, and 3 months though, right after I sold my company, the company that purchased my company, they purchased a second company that was in bankruptcy. And they had consultants in there for years. And the company was incorporated in 1969. It was one of the top companies, at least in the state of Florida, might have been even in the country. So meanwhile, and I'm backtracking, right when I sold my company, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is because, you know, I have my company, and now I'm given a second company. And I'm like, well, how am I going to run both these different companies? And when I got in front of everybody, when I took over the second company, everybody looked down. Everybody seemed depressed. It was just like, you know, the world's coming to an end, whatever it is. The company is being sold. We're going to lose our jobs, whatever it is. So I got in and I said, we're going to absolutely quadruple our sales in less than 1 month. And it took 3 weeks. So my whole mindset was build the company fast enough based on messaging, storytelling, absolutely hammering the market so that people will respond in a way where, you know, we're building it. We're not looking back. We're not being pulled down. We're actually, you know, getting to the point where we need to hire more people, which is exactly what happened. So my point is, anything is possible. Anything is possible. And I took all my notes, and I took all the notes of having over 6,000 business customers. And I kept taking all these notes. And then I stayed on for a year after my 3-year agreement. And then I retired from the tech industry. And then my next thing with Breaking Fear was actually writing the book, The Power of Breaking Fear. So I took all my notes, and then I realized I don't know how to write. I'm like, oh my God, what do I do? This is terrible. I started writing, month after month. This is not good. I'm not even cried. I'm like, I can't do this. This is the hardest thing I've ever done. But boom, it hit me 6 months in. Words took off. The content took off, and I literally created a workbook approach on how to achieve anything personally or professionally based on breaking fear. And it's not just so much about like jumping out of an airplane or fear and death or all these different things or retirement or, it really is. It's a strategy in a way because it applies to all of us in life. And, with writing that book, I didn't know what kind of outcome I was going to have. I mean, I was like, okay, the content is decent, but when it was finally finished, it started getting recognized not only in the US, but in other countries around the world. Wow, I'm not a writer, but I became a writer. And then that one book turned into 10 more books. And then all the books turned into speaking events. Next thing you know, I'm doing podcasts, TV, radio, all from somebody that had a 6th grade or 7th grade education at the age of 20. So then I achieved all these great things, right? And the thing about breaking fear is you're never going to have a big ego about it. You're never going to have an ego about it because when you go through certain things in your life and when you start over, you're always going to be humbled. And sometimes you think, well, there's no way I'm going to be able to achieve this. There's no way. It's too hard. And then a lot of us give up. We think that we're not good enough. We think that maybe we don't look a certain part, act a certain part, whatever it may be. But I can tell you this, the impossible is very, very, very probable. If you look at certain things in reference to competing with yourself and not competing with other people. And I can tell you from the standpoint of being in a draft room or speaking for NFL teams or, speaking at giant events or whatever it is, I was on the fast track and I enjoyed the ride and I raised my kids and, I've been blessed with, good educated kids. And then I achieved all these different things. But something happened. I thought I graduated. I thought I graduated from breaking fear because I had emotional peace, financial freedom. What does this book say? Here's a book, The Power of Breaking Fear. What's it say? Emotional power, wealth, and true happiness. I had it all. Then all of a sudden I turned 50. Uh-oh. I wasn't ready for that one. I didn't know that, I heard about it when I go to events. Hey, what do I do? I've done this or I've done that, or I haven't done this and I haven't done that. So always giving people the answers, right? Ooh, I'll never forget in the kitchen. I'm pulling open the drawer and I'm like, I don't have any gas left in the tank. My brain is fried. Somehow I'm 50 now. Now what? I didn't have a backup plan. I achieved all these different things. It's not about money. It's not about wealth. It's not about anything. It's about giving back, right? Helping other people, doing the very best you can in order to create a great dynamic for the next generation to do the very best that they can. But still that wall I hit. And I started to realize that, what? I literally front loaded my life so fast that I really didn't think that I would have a future in anything else. And then I retired. I took off a year. When I took off a year, that was brutal. That was even worse because it was like, I'm in my thoughts. I'm trying to solve problems that don't have solutions. And then I was like, you know what? Time to do something. Always do something in a way where it's based on, and it's not just being selfish. It's about you. What can you do for yourself in a way that you're going to be able to create an environment that's going to give you more positive energy, that you look at yourself And if you look at your past and say, you know what, well, my past isn't so great or whatever it is, or if it is great or whatever, because I've seen a lot of people succeed and they don't know how to get off the treadmill. They're miserable. Or I've seen a lot of people not succeed and they're trying to get on the treadmill. They're miserable. So what you do is you look at your life in a way and backtrack it. Well, I learned this, I learned that, I learned this. So you've got your own laboratory experiment. So then I reflected upon that and I looked at all the different things in a way. What did make me happy? Well, it was because I had a purpose. What creates a purpose? Action. I could think my way out of nothing, but I can certainly do certain things to create that mindset that I could literally achieve anything. You know, it's like when I work with companies, it's not about me. My job is to double, quadruple their sales instantly. So they have, you know, an ROI, you know, so it's like, what am I doing for somebody else in a way that's not so much about me, because me will come. Money will come if you're always giving. Money is, you know, 5 cars and all that other stuff. It's about being present in the moment and knowing what you have. And if you're caught up in yesterday, then that movie is playing over and over again. And you're not going to be able, or you're going to struggle to get out of that movie until you realize that you can literally achieve whatever you want every single day. And, you know, one of the things I always talk about is, you know, logic versus emotion. You know, a lot of people say, well, you know, starting a company is all based on emotion. Well, you got to use logic first and then emotion second. And in life, you know, we're all going to have emotions. We're all going to have transitions. We're all going to do certain things, you know, but it's like for me personally, even to this day, you know, my back's a little bit off. My mind is still at 20 some years old, but I box. So, you know, I'm not going to allow anything to stop me from keep moving forward in life. And that's where I think age, you know, sometimes we label ourselves and say, well, we're getting older, or we don't have the same value as what we used to have, or we used to have so much fun and maybe we don't have it now. Well, you can. I literally just rebooted my whole entire life in about 12 months. Started over on everything. Moved, did everything, just reboot. And I can tell you this, I'm having a lot of fun. But did I crash? I crashed. And the saddest thing that I've, you know, over time is, you know, I meet with people or I do speaking events or go into companies. A lot of people don't want to admit they're in fear. We're all in fear. You look over the last couple of years. What have we all gone through, right? And it's not that we haven't gone through this through generations of time. It's just that we have a cell phone that reminds us every single day that there's a polarization of something that's negative that's happening. So all of a sudden we're getting reminded every single day that there's new fears. And that's what's happening. And I like what, you know, somebody said about the kids, right? I go to universities, you know, speak, teach, whatever it is. Put away the cell phone. Break out the pen and paper. I like that because right now we're getting kind of diluted and we're caught up in chasing all these different things. And, you know, there's a lot of different topics that I speak on. I speak on sales, entrepreneurship, relationships. These are all books I wrote, but the main one is The Power of Breaking Fear. But, you know, the main component of that is really self-awareness. Where are you right now? Where do you want to be? Set a goal, set small goals because they'll all add up. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's all based on the fact of, you know, what do you have control over or what do you not have control over? You know, that is the most significant thing that happens. We're fighting battles all the time in our head based on, you know, what's happening in the world, what's happening in our country, what's happening in our family, what's happening over here, what's happening here, and kind of got to stay in your lane. So Marcella, you have a question?
I do, because now you're touching on something right now after going through like the history of you, which is fascinating, about how do you do that? How do you overcome the fear of stepping out of your comfort zone, trying something new, and just saying, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to step off. I'm going to do this. I understand the preparedness, prepare first, but it's getting to that point to say, it's okay, because I'm going to learn from the failures. If I fall, I'll get back up again, and I'll just, you know what, I just try it again, and find a different way. But to make it happen, how do you overcome that initial fear component?
I think it's like, it's like I even write in the book, right? You have a glass globe. How have you designed your glass globe? Like a snow globe. If you look at it, is it the glass globe that you want? If you shook it, would all the pieces fall over into a heap of disarray? Or would they stand up? So it's based on taking a step back and saying, okay, I need to start looking at it from the outside, as opposed to working inside of myself. I need to work outside of myself and look at it, self-awareness, and say, you know what, that doesn't feel right. That relationship's kind of, is that me or them? Or, maybe those friends that I have aren't so, friendly, whatever it may be. Or maybe that job, I really don't like it. Well, if you don't like it, why don't you like it? Is it something to do, from maybe a different goal? Maybe you want something else. Maybe you're bored. Maybe you want, to be inspired more. Maybe you want to give more. So you step outside of yourself, literally, and look at it, because we design our own books. We are our own book. What would that cover look like? How would the chapters look? How would it read? Would it just stop? So, and that's where it's self-awareness is the biggest key. Is a lot of people have trouble with reflecting on themselves, on how they beat themselves up, or how they come across, or maybe they have this giant ego and they think they're the greatest person in the entire world until something collapses, and then boom, their legs come out. So it's really about stepping out of your own inside and bringing it out, and then looking in. And you can always ask people. I always say too, it's like, if you have some people that you trust around, you just say, hey, how do I come across? And then start writing down, I'm a fear guy. What is the number one thing that you fear? Start with that. Do you have control over it? If you have
It's
control
interesting what
over
you
it-
just said too about your people around you. We have someone on here. Is Sandy? Sandy, are you with us on audio?
I am.
You are? I have a question, because your expertise is in advisory board. And one of the things I've always shared with folks is about having a personal advisory board. And that's something that Tim just touched on,
Yes.
and how that all works. So I hate to put you on the spot, but I know that'd be a great question that you would be able to come up with.
No, I absolutely believe in having an advisory board, both for your business and as an individual. And, having a personal advisory board, if you have a bunch of mentors and you get them in the room, you really have an advisory board, right? But the difference is that you get them all on the same page. And having someone advise you personally, it could be about your life, like Tim is talking about, how to overcome some of these fears. Because when people pitch in, they can give you different perspectives on the same problem. And that's what I like. On the business side, it really helped me to grow and sell my business, because having all the experts sitting there, invested in me and in my company was really, really quite helpful. So that's what I believe in.
Perfect. And you're 100% right. From a personal and professional standpoint, and being in so many businesses for so many years, and how to ignite companies almost immediately, it's collaboration. It's communication, open-mindedness. You know, I've worked with solopreneurs and, you know, some of them can't get out of their own way because they're micromanaging to the point that they can't grow. Well, how do you get out of that? You start listening, opening up more. Let other people be the experts as well. And then all of a sudden that solopreneur turns into an entrepreneur. And then all of a sudden you set up that business model and you take a step back. And that's why it's like in business, I always tell people, you know, teach, delegate, and inspect. You know, at a certain point in time, the business shouldn't be running you. You should be running the business. And that is our life too. If our lives are running us and we're not running our lives. So you want to be on the offense and just kind of look at everything. And it really is probable, if you look at it from that standpoint, that you can really achieve. And this is, you know, people, you're a motivational speaker. No, I build companies. I help people overcome the most drastic things. And, you know, one great message can turn a company from $1 million into $150 million. One great story, you know, all of it's relevant, right? So my thing is, I just, you know, just being absorbed with so much information for so much time and taking on this topic, you know, I can go into different things and come up with it. I can talk about EBITDA. I can talk about benchmarks. I can talk about, well, let's look at what's holding you back personally before you make that leap into something maybe professionally. Sometimes your best decision is not making one. Sometimes the best thing you could ever do is have patience. You know, and sometimes we get so impatient with stuff, but, you know, to the point, the more that you surround yourself with, it's not even so much like-minded people, but maybe people you want to be like.
Mhm.
Boom.
Good point. It's a great point.
You start to step up that ladder.
Can we open the floor up? Are you good if we take some questions from those that have joined us today? Does anyone have any questions or something for the good of the group? I thought of Monica about one of the points that you brought up about showing up to give, because one of the things that I always that I do mention is, are you showing up giving, or are you showing up expecting to get? So do you give or do you go get? And I know that Monica, from your experiences, do you have anything to share on that part, you know, with Tim, so we could start opening up for some interaction with everybody here as part of the conversation today?
Oh, sure. I'm happy to share. So a few things, really staying with the topic of how to reinvent yourself after 50, how to go for it. It's really about thinking about who you are, what it is that you want to do. Many of us have followed a particular path, have said these are the right things to do, the right time to get married, when to have kids, when to follow certain protocols in our work lives. And now when we're after 50, when we have this experience, we're able to think about things a little differently and expanding our networks and really thinking about who it is that we want to be as we move forward. So taking this opportunity here, it's a group of folks expanding our networks. It's thinking about how can you show up as a giver? How can you show up with the information that you have for the betterment of the group? And that could be really sharing stories. That's probably the biggest thing that I do when I'm with folks, is share my story, stories of, you know, my life, my past, and how I'm looking to take those aspects of my life into my future. So that's my share for the group.
It's a great point. And to your point, stories sell more than anything else. It's like Finding Nemo. Everyone has a story. Everybody has their story is just as important as anybody else's. And, you know, I remember when I went to an event and I helped with storytelling, and this person spoke, And I said, my gosh, you got the most incredible story. Why don't you share that story? And she was like, I can't, it's not, I'm like, it's a great story. So, but you know, it's like and this is what I've kind of leveraged with going into the other half of our lives, right? Is 100% sharing stories, building that network up. Because then all of a sudden you're starting to get around people that think the same way you do. Maybe they've overcome it. Maybe they're looking to overcome it. Maybe they're looking to try different things. Maybe they're looking to start a company, whatever it may be. But it's getting all that information together. And next thing you know, you feel like that you're not alone, but you're actually going up the hill a lot further and a lot faster than you ever thought it, no matter what age.
Tim, I was going to ask you a little bit about, is there a process that you know, as you're sort of reevaluating this next thing that you're doing, the next stage, is there a process that you undertake, you know, kind of to figure out your purpose in that space?
Yeah, you know, it's a great question, you know, for me, because I did hit a wall fast. And I really had to look at, what do I like to do versus what do I think I have to do? Just because I've done something for a long period of time doesn't mean I have to hold on to it. You know, just because, you know, I've got, you know, a decent book or whatever it is, and yeah, there's people that want to buy it or hire me, doesn't mean I have to do it all the time, right? So I start with, what do I like and what do I not like? And what is holding me back and what is not holding me back? And I start to look at more of the passion of it, right? That's where the emotion starts to come in. So when I start looking at it and I start doing something and I'm like, pull back. And is it fear or is it just, it's not, I've done it. I want to do something different. And that's when you start looking at, you know, different ways to build a different portrait in your life. And then you get, you know, you start to cut away and learn to say no more. You detach more and you cut the cord more. You know, a lot of people like to please everybody all the time or not being judged. That holds you back. And I found myself into that, you know, where I started to get like just caught up into so many different places and I thought I had to be everywhere and help everyone. No, I have to be selfish within to give back. And it's a like and I think it's basically writing a like and love list and a dislike list too. So questions, what else?
Well, this is Sandy. I put something in the chat that I would really love some input on. So I'm quite a bit over 50 and I've started, you know, 2 or 3 other companies since then that I'm still managing. But something popped up that I totally unexpected or I hadn't given much thought to how much it would impact my life, and that's caregiving. Caregiving to my parents, who both just had, you know, major surgeries. They're up in their 80s. And so that takes away from my personal ambitions. The things that I wanted to do have to take a back seat sometimes to some of those things. And it's not something that you kind of learn in school, right? Like you're going to be a caregiver and this is caregiving 101 in shop class. But it really does impact our lives. And what do you think of that in terms of giving up your own personal ambitions and goals to be a caregiver?
It's a fantastic question. And I will say this, I have parents that are basically in the same situation. And transparently, my dad went through a couple of surgeries 20 years ago and something happened with, I don't know, the medications, whatever it is. The bottom line is that it's been a struggle for the last 20 years. And I'm the caregiver for the most part. I have to, you know, I've got a mom and all that, but it's like, you know, I've had to fight that own battle. how much time do I put towards that? And versus how much time do I put towards my own life? And I've had to make, you know, it used to be I was more thrusted into, you know, being on call 24/7. And then as time is one of the changes that I've changed over the last even year or two, I would say, that I started to get more, I wouldn't say selfish with my time, but I've gotten more balanced with it. Because things are going to happen the way they're going to happen. And if they, you know, my parents have the ability to take care of themselves for the most part, which they do, then how much do I really need to put towards that 20, you know, 7 days out of the week, 4 days out of the week, 3 days out of the week, 2 days, but it's something that it's kind of a moral question. And, you know, it's, you know, just like I tell my kids, I'm like, don't worry about your parents. Don't worry about this. You need to build your own life. You need to build your own family. You need to, you know, be selfish with that. And I'm not saying not to give, right? But it's just, it's the balance. And it's really just, you know, thinking deep inside yourself and saying, okay, how much is this really pulling me down all the time? Because if I'm pulled down all the time, how am I going to give back? And you know, it's quantity versus quality, and it's a personal choice, but it's something that I'm very aware of, and I've had to make some difficult decisions on that.
Tim, if I could weigh in, first of all, apologies for being late. We've dealt with that same issue, and most of our generation is dealing with it. And when you know, we took care of my mother-in-law for years. She's now in assisted living. And what I said to my wife is, your promise to your father on his deathbed was that you would take care of your mother, but you have to know when the time comes when you can no longer do it. And, you know, arranging for care is still taking care of that person.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Someone once said to me when my daughter was young that you have to remember, if you're on the airplane, what do they tell you? They say, put your mask on before you help somebody else. And I always thought that's the best advice I think I ever got from somebody, because if you're, to your point, Tim, if you're tired and, you know, not feeling well or whatever, you're not in your good space, you can't be a good caretaker. So you have to kind of know when you need to take a step back, and maybe that's momentarily, but I think balance is a good word.
Yeah, and just, you know, I'll just bring this up. You know, I read a book of psychology from the University of Michigan some years ago, and it was written, I don't know, in the 70s or whatever it is. And I read this story about they were doing experiments with these mice, and they were putting them in this bathtub, and they wanted to see if their whiskers would determine if they swim clockwise or counterclockwise. So they cut the whiskers off. So they put the mice in the water, and they started to drown. And then they kept going through this whole thing. And then some of them swam a little bit longer than the others, but when they just put them in the water with their whiskers fully intact, they could swim for 10, 12, 15, 20 hours. But when their whiskers were cut off, cut in half, less. And the point of the matter is because they were more stressed out. When you cut those, so my point is that yes, if you're worn down, if you're stressed out, and then you have to go into the water, let's say, or ocean, then how long you'll be able to tread water. So to your point, pull down the oxygen mask, because the stress and fear, right? We go back into the same thing. Fear is, you know, what do you bring into the game if you're already worn out? And that's where it's like being disciplined and understanding that it's okay to feel guilty. It's okay to feel regret sometimes. It's okay for all of that, right? It's just human. It's just, we have to go through our lives in a certain way, and some things are going to be gray area, but if we're always trying to do the right thing, then it's going to work out the way it should. And the point of the matter is, Be the best version of who you can be, because you will be able to give and show up when the time is right.
Well, thank you guys for your answers. This could be a whole topic to itself.
Probably could. May I just chime in here for a moment? Again, it's Roz, the expert maker. One of the things that, because I have several friends who deal with a really similar issue, is buying back your time and being willing to delegate.
Mm.
So if it means having someone else cook meals, if it means having someone clean your home, if it means hiring someone that's with your parents for a portion of the day as they take care, you've got to buy back your time, because what happens is caring for our children and aging parents just rents so much space in your head, right? When you're not with them, you're worried about them. And being willing to go, everything doesn't have to be on me. I'm not an expert in everything. I'm going to allow the experts to do what they do. And money I can make back again and again and again and again and again, but I can't get my time back. And so that really would be my input. Plus, one of the things I've also found is one child will end up with the majority of the caretaking duties. I have a friend who is one of 7 who's doing all the work. It's also about soliciting the family, soliciting the others who can certainly take part. And as Tim was telling us, a lot of this is based on fear. You might be concerned that nobody else can do it as well as you. They can. Let some of this stuff go. Let some of it go.
Very well said. And I 100% agree. And that is, delegation is huge. It's significantly important. And that's where the fear comes in. You know, when my son has underlying issues, when COVID hit, you know, and you know, when he was a baby until he was 15, I was in the ER all the time. So what do I have control over? Only so much. So I can control my thoughts to literally put me 6 feet under the ground worrying so much. Where is that going to get anybody? So I have to just say, you know what? I can only do the best in certain areas. And what can I control? And what do I not control? And who else? Great point. Who else can I get involved to help with this, to delegate it? Because sometimes we all just try to hold, like, oh, let me just take care of everything. Because no one can do it as good as we can, or I can, or you can, or whatever it is. So it's huge, especially as we get older. It's a great point.
So before, I know some people have to leave, so before people jump off, and this is a great conversation, I just want to let everyone know we're going to do an in-person event on November 10th at 5 p.m. for a happy hour and a meet and greet at Calandra's Mediterranean Grill in Fairfield on Route 46. So if you signed up, we'll send out information, but wanted to share that with this group.
And also want to assure everyone that I know for myself too, as well, with the whole, you know, COVID concern, it's high ceilings. It's like 3 stories high. It's all socially distant. So it's it feels good, feels right. And it'll be a nice time. November 10th. Great presentation. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, from Barbara. A lot of thank yous, which was wonderful. Well, then I will say thank you to everyone for joining us today. Tim, do you have any closing remarks and comments before we meet again on November 10th?
Pick something that you're worried about the most, that you have control over, and break the fear.